inside edge. A nice pitch from Kevin Mandel for the second out here in the Auburn 7th.
Well, now decision time, and I've been in that dugout with these decisions. You're like, well, he looks good. Do we leave him in to face the
Radio TV Phono Nut here, and we have a Hallicrafters model S-20 from about 1938. This is going to be a resurrection video. Obviously, by what you heard, it's already been resurrected, but you'll see what we had to do to resurrect it in just a few moments. Now, from what I can tell about the S-20, it was introduced in 1938 and was manufactured for less than 1 year, and then replaced in 39 by the S-20R, and then that receiver was in production until probably right after World War II ended. So these S-20 models are not all that common. Now, the versions I've seen online, most of them have a lift up top for easy tube replacement. This one here does not. You have to take the whole shell off, this top shell off to access the tube. So I'm inclined to believe that this is probably an earlier model. Now, I picked this up at an estate sale along with several other radios that you'll see momentarily, and I'll just tell you, the amount of quote-unquote old-timers that still have stuff like this is dwindling away, and the types of estate sales where you find this kind of stuff is getting to be relatively rare. And as time goes by, those types of sales are going to become more and more infrequent. But anyway, the guy who had this sale went to work for a local radio station. Well, let me back up. The guy who owned this stuff, he is deceased now. Him and his wife have deceased. He came to our area back in the early 50s to work for a local radio station. I think he might have started out as a DJ and then went over to the engineering side. He worked there for a number of years until the station was bought and ended up going out of business. It was 910 WCOC, which was bought by the people who owned 1450 WOKK because they wanted the more powerful 910 spot to move WOKK, and then in late 81, early 82, they swapped WOKK with their FM sister station, WALT, moving OKK to FM, and then WALT moved to 910 AM carrying an R&B format, which they ran until the mid to late 90s, and then they ran a black gospel format briefly, and then they did talk for years, and then they switched back to black gospel, and that's the WMOG that you hear in some of my recent videos. But anyway, this guy, after the radio station folded, he went to work for the TV station, and I think he retired from there. But he was also a collector of old radios, and he was a member of our now defunct radio club. He's a real nice guy. I remember seeing him at some of our meets, and I talked to him on the phone a few times. But getting back to the estate sale, there were a bunch of radios there, which you will see in future videos, and I almost walked past this Hallicrafters. I'd already picked up what I wanted to buy at the moment, and then I made one last walkthrough, and sitting right in the middle of the floor, standing up on its side in one of the other rooms, was this Hallicrafters with no price on it. And I tracked down the person having the sale, and he made me a price that I could live with, so it came home with me. Now, this radio is in above average cosmetic condition. Most of these old Hallicrafters sets that you find, well, I'm not going to say most, but a good many of them have been hacked on and chopped on and drilled on and such to where they could be modified to add extra accessories. This one that has not happened to. Anyway, as I was trying to say before I was so rudely interrupted, this set hasn't really been hacked on. The only modification that I see, and it was very neatly done, somebody added what appears to be a phono input jack on the rear apron of the chassis, and I may leave it, I may take it out, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. And there's also another female plug on the back that was factory where you could plug in an external signal meter. Alright, so here's the phono jack on the back of the radio, and like I said, I'll probably just leave that alone, because if I take it off it's going to be even more obvious that something's not right. At least with it there, it does look somewhat in its place, seeing as how many radios from this era had a phono input jack on them. Now, something else I learned during my reading up on these sets is that during the time this was made, Hallicrafters tended to use power transformers that were rated right at the borderline at the amount of current that was required to operate the radio, and that was all fine and good until something like a capacitor became leaky and caused a circuit to draw too much current, and then that put a great strain on the power transformer and caused it to go up in smoke, which is why a good many of these you find have replacement transformers installed. Now this one here has the original transformer and it tests out okay, which you'll see momentarily. And we're also missing one of the feet on the bottom of the cabinet, which will be easy enough to replace. If that's the only problem I ever encounter in life, then we'll be batting 1,000. But on that note, it's kind of funny how these things work out. We got to the sale probably 5 minutes after it opened, and I went through the first room, didn't really see anything I wanted. Went through the second room, that's where the bulk of the radios were. And then I bought what I was going to buy and was getting ready to leave, and I decided to make one more walkthrough. I went back in the room where I started, and this radio was standing up on the floor, standing up on its side on the floor next to some aluminum trash can. And my first thought was, yeah, somebody's claimed this stuff and they're just piling it up here. But whenever I was perusing it, didn't nobody come tell me it was there. So, but really in that kind of situation, if you put it down, it's fair game. If you want it, you probably better go ahead and pay for it and take it with you, or at least have one of the people running the sale put it behind the table for you. I know one time I was at a sale and picked up a radio, and some guy who I pegged as a flipper, "Hey, that's mine." I didn't get in any argument with the guy. I'm not going to fight with anybody over anything, but technically if it hadn't been paid for, and if it hadn't been put in a dedicated pile of stuff to be paid for, then it ain't his. But like I said, I wasn't going to get in any argument. But anyway, I went back and found this radio, and like I said, I tracked down the guy running the sale, and we came to an agreement on the price, and I loaded it up. Now the funny thing is, when I was in the room with all the radios, there was a late 40s, early 50s Zenith Transoceanic. I don't know what model. I didn't even bother to raise the cover because I've got several of those and I didn't really need another one. And had I bought the Transoceanic, I would not have had enough money to buy the Hallicrafters. Now before I got ready to leave, there was a lady probably in her early to mid 20s, if I had to make a guess, and she had grabbed the Transoceanic and a little common as dirt Zenith plastic set from the early 50s, and just trying to make conversation, I asked if she was a radio collector, and she said, "No, my dad is, he loves them." And I wanted to get around to asking if they were from the area or did they come in from out of town, but she got away from me before I could talk to her any further. Now the funny part is, she'll find 100 transoceanics before she would have found this particular model of Hallicrafters based on what I'm reading about them. So you'd have thought she would have left the transoceanic and picked up the Hallicrafters, but I'm not complaining with how it worked out. Perhaps maybe she was there just trying to find a couple of radios to buy for her dad as gifts. I don't know, but at any rate, it's funny how some of these things work out, and I hope her dad enjoys the transoceanic and the other little Zenith set that he got. I know I'm enjoying the stuff I got, which you'll see more of it later. Now let's get on with the radio. There's the label on the bottom, still intact. Now, someone wrote on it that it's a model S-20 and what rider schematic it's in. Although I don't see any S-20 indication anywhere on the radio, it just says Sky Champion. Looking at the inside, it appears to be very clean and mostly original. I see right off the top of my head 2 capacitors that have been replaced. That bluish one right there and that black one with the red print on it. Now the good news, I believe the black ones with the red print are actual diaphragm caps, so that one is probably okay, as is the blue one. And I see a more modern wire on the filter capacitor can, and they have 2 sections of that can wired in parallel, so I'm inclined to believe that's been replaced before, which is probably a good thing. So there's a chance that we might can put a power cord on this thing and it might fire up and play. Alright, cord replaced, old plug transplanted to new cord. And what I like to do to these is, of course, tie the underwriter's knot, and I like to tin the wires. That makes it easier to get them under the screws without them wiggling out as you're tightening down, and it also prevents the possibility of any loose little strands sticking out. And now it's in there very secure, and while I had to desolder the connection anyway, I replaced the line to chassis death cap with a 0.01 microfarad, which was the same value as the original AC rated disc safety capacitor. And here we are with the shroud removed, and the transformer does have model S-20 stamped on it, so that answers that question as far as the model number, and we know the transformer is original. We have our original electrodynamic field coil style speaker. Of course, that filter cam, we know that's been replaced at some point in time. We see the tube markings have been written on the chassis, but whenever I rub the dust off, the markings seem to be going away with it. No rust. So yeah, I think I got very lucky, and I got a nice example to restore here. Now what I want to do now is pull the 80 rectifier, and we're going to power it up through the dim bulb tester and check the condition of this power transformer. Okay, we have the AC voltmeter connected to our rectifier pin socket, and then we have the radio plugged in series with the 60-watt incandescent bulb. The reason for that is for current limiting, and if there's a short somewhere, the bulb will take the brunt of it. So let's turn it on and see what happens. And of course that voltage will rise as the resistance of the bulb filament lowers as it gets hot. So we have just a tad bit over 600 volts. Of course that voltage will be more if the bulb was bypassed, so that looks good. Now we'll check from center tap to each winding, and we should have approximately 300 volts from each end of the winding to center tap. If that voltage is grossly different, then that means we got a problem. 302 there. and 302 there. So that high voltage winding is good. And we know the 6.3 volt winding is good because I see the dial lamp illuminated. And our 5 volt filament winding for the rectifier is good. So as far as I'm concerned, we have a good transformer. Now what I want to do is get the solid state replacement for the 80 rectifier and our variable power supply, and we're going to start this out at 0 volts and slowly bring it up while monitoring the B+. The purpose of that is to reform this filter capacitor if need be, and to help make sure, detect any other possible shorts that might exist before they cause problems. Now for the long haul, we really don't trust a reformed electrolytic. If it's not totally good originally, then eventually it's going to get replaced. But for testing purposes, then it should be fine for that. Now, given that this radio has been serviced at some point, probably back in the 70s or 80s, and given how relatively clean it is, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if this radio will receive something. Now here's our 80 solid state replacement. I just have actually 4 1N4007 diodes, 2 in series for one leg, 2 in series for the other leg. That's just to give us a little margin of safety there. Now, a word about these solid state plug-in things, and I know a lot of you are tired of hearing me talk about this, but if you are, then you'll just have to get tired, because I'm probably going to talk about it a lot more for the benefit of those who might not have heard it the first time. You can buy these commercially made, but I do not recommend them, because due to the much higher efficiency of the solid state diodes, your B+ is going to be a lot higher than normal, and you're going to have a very high initial turn-on surge. So, and that's not good for the equipment, especially over time. And I have seen equipment that was pretty well cooked because somebody substituted a solid state rectifier where a tube should have been. And the only way you should use these solid state rectifiers without adding some kind of dropping resistor is for testing purposes and bringing the device up slowly on a variac. If you do use one of these for testing purposes at full line voltage, you do not want to turn on the device under test with this plugged in. You want to first leave this unplugged, turn the device on, let the tubes warm up, and then plug this in. But like I said, only for testing purposes, under controlled conditions. If you're going to use this for regular use, then you're going to have to add some kind of power resistor to drop the excess voltage, and as hot as that power resistor is going to get, you're really going to be defeating your purpose. So you might as well just use a tube. Now, I've had people tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about, you're full of BS. Well, if you want to think that, then you just think it all day long. I have my reasons for thinking the way I do, and I'm going to stick by them. Alright, solid state rectifier in place, DC voltmeter clipped to the cathode of the rectifier. Between the cathode and B-, the chassis. Radio plugged into the dim bulb tester, starting us out at 0 volts. And let's bring it up. Alright, 32 volts. And slowly rising. That's the capacitor reforming. And we will just let that sit until it peaks out. And then whenever it peaks out, we'll give it a little more AC input. Alright, so it's peaked at about 36, so let's give it a bit more juice. And we'll just let that peak out, and I'm not going to show you all of these segments, but you get the idea. If anything happens that you need to know about, then I'll cut in and make you aware of it. Now, oddly enough, it looks like someone would replace the plate bypass cap on the output tube and then another cap going over to the headphone jack, but they did not replace the grid coupling capacitor. And looking at the grid voltage on the output tube, get on there and stay. Got about 15 volts there, and on the plate side of that cap, 37 volts. So that cap is very leaky, and it's going to need to be replaced before we get too carried away here. But for now, I'm just going to pull the 6F6, and that way that tube won't get damaged and it won't overconduct and draw too much current. But it's leaky caps like that is what could take out the very marginally rated power transformer in these sets. And I forgot to mention, the reason we want the solid state rectifier for testing purposes is because that will allow V+ voltage to be developed at even the lowest AC input, whereas with a vacuum tube rectifier we would have to get the AC input up fairly high before the vacuum tube would go into emission and V+ would be developed. And for reforming capacitors and running tests like that on the B+ line, we really want to start out at as low of a voltage as possible and then work our way up. We don't want to start out at like say 100 volts or whatever B+ and go up from there. We preferably need to start out at the lowest voltage possible and work our way up from there. Now, so far our capacitor is doing nicely. We're up to 242 volts B+ now. Now technically what I should also be doing is feeling the can of that capacitor to make sure it's not getting warm or hot, but with the sun beating down on this, it's going to be warm or hot anyway, so that would be sort of a false indication. But if this capacitor has leakage and starts leaking once we reach a certain voltage threshold, then the B+ will drop substantially. So far it hasn't done that. Now, with all of the other tubes being in place, everything but the output tube, it's probably going to drop a little bit anyway as the tubes start conducting. If the output tube was installed, that would definitely place a load on it, especially with that leaky coupling cap. And another advantage to using a tube rectifier that I didn't mention earlier, in equipment like this that doesn't have a B+ fuse or an AC line fuse, which most equipment from this era falls under that category, when something shorts in the B+ line, your rectifier acts as the fuse, the tube rectifier. You don't have that protection with a solid state rectifier. Most likely what's going to happen is if something shorts downstream, it's going to draw too much current and could possibly cause your solid state rectifier to short, which would take out the power transformer in fairly short order if you didn't have a fuse installed to stop that. And some devices that have fuses, the fuse will be located in the center tap of the high voltage winding on the transformer, and some of them will have the fuse on the AC input, and some devices will have a fuse both places just for extra security. Now I'm hearing occasional pops in the speaker with the output tube removed, which is a bit concerning. That could mean that we have an audio output transformer that's trying to die. I'm going to have to go look at the schematic and make sure there are no revisions noted, but they have that plate bypass cap between the plate and screen grid, but according to the schematic it's supposed to go between plate and ground. I don't really think that would really hurt anything, but I will look at the schematic and see if there are any revisions noted, and if not, we'll move it back to ground like the schematic says. Well, at full AC line with the bulb and series, I have 326 volts B+. Of course, it'll be higher without the bulb. So, right now, I cannot speak for the capacitance value of this filter, but I can say that it does not appear to be leaky or shorted. Now, before we continue, this is the grid coupling cap for the output tube. I'm really not getting any kind of well-defined eye opening there. What about leakage? Yep, even at the lowest setting, it's horribly leaky. And next is the 0.01 microfarad depth cap. Same story with that one, no eye opening to amount to anything. Yeah, leaking at 200 volts. Now, I just gutted this grid coupling capacitor. I've got one soldering gun that I use for actual soldering, and then another one with a tip that isn't so great that I use for such stuff as this, heating up the ends of capacitors and letting the beeswax drip out and pulling the insides out, leaving nothing but an empty tube. Now, I don't restuff capacitors very often, but this set might warrant, I think this radio warrants a bit of extra special attention. And I wrap the body of the new cap with trimmed down masking tape so it won't overlap the sides of the capacitor body. We wrap enough tape around there where it will fit somewhat tightly inside of the old capacitor sleeve. And then once we get the capacitor inside of the tube and it's relatively tight, then I've ran across a couple of old hot snot sticks here that were left over from something my mother did. So I just cut little pieces of those down to size, stick them down in the ends, and then heat them up with a soldering iron, making sure to have the leads coming out as close to center as possible. And then once it's all melted and down in there, we let it cure for a few minutes, and then we're ready to put it back in the radio. Now, these hot snot sticks are available in a variety of colors, and brown would have been better for this application because that would look more similar to what the original ends look like with beeswax in them. But this doesn't look too terribly bad. And there it is, back in place. Now, I'm about ready to put the 80 back in and fire this thing up and see what it does. Alright, tubes are repopulated, radio's plugged into the dim bulb tester. Now let's turn it on and see what happens. Alright, I'm hearing some static. Nothing when I turn the band selector or the tuning knob. Alright, where is our 6Q7? Would this be it? Alright, our audio appears to be dead. Alright, what is our B+? Alright, 200, let's see if we hit the 300 mark. No, I don't think we're going to quite make it. Now it's dropping down. Oh, that's way too low. 130 volts and dropping. 122 volts. Let's pull that audio output tube and see if it rises. Okay, so we still got something going on here, and we're drawing about 300 milliamps on the AC. It's not too terribly bad, but could be better. Alright, let's check some voltages at our output tube socket. Alright, plate of the output tube. Okay, good. We have B plus there, so that tells us that the audio output transformer primary isn't open. Alright, got almost 5 volts on the cathode of the output tube, so the output tube is doing something. Now let's look at the plate of our first audio tube. Yeah, we got plate voltage there. But I have nothing in the speaker whenever I touch the grid cap of the first audio tube. And I touch the control grid of the audio output tube, and under normal conditions I should hear a bit of a hum in the speaker. I didn't. So we're going to fire this up with the tube in place and take note of the B plus, the plate voltage on the tube, and then I'm going to pull the audio output tube and see what happens to the B plus. So here we go. Well, it might help if I had everything plugged in. Let's try that one more time. Ooh, 91 volts, 88 volts. Pull the tube, let's see what happens. Okay, it went up, but something is still lacking in this B plus supply, because it should still be more than 167 volts. I think I've discovered a problem. The grid lead from my coupling cap to the output tube broke loose, so let me fix that real fast. Alright, now I'm going to give it full voltage. The bulb was starving it before, and I bet the grid cap lead don't pop off this time, or the grid lead on that terminal strip. Oh yeah! That sounds a lot better. And it's working.
I see trees of green. I see them bloom for me.
The Bulldogs, only in Mississippi Ford. 1977-2024 total sales.
Bulldog fans, are you looking for the perfect weekend getaway?
It's alive.
Look no further. Pearl River Resort.
Alright, I'm at 374 volts B plus. That seems to be pretty stout.
That's what that is.
Now with the 60 watt bulb in series with this, that was initially starving it of voltage, and that's the reason our audio output stage wasn't working. But the reason we didn't have any audio was a boo-boo on my part. That wire between our terminal strip and grid terminal of the output tube popped loose, but like I said, it won't be popping loose now. So just to recap,
with 3 more runs now,
and this is about all I intend to do in this video. This was just going to be a evaluation video anyway. We replaced the rotten power cord. We replaced the AC death cap from one side of the AC line to chassis, and we restuffed the audio coupling cap for the grid of the output tube. And that's all we've done so far, other than bring the set up slowly with a solid state rectifier to reform this electrolytic, which now seems to be running cool except for the ambient heat from the tubes that's surrounding it. But I'm touching it down here at the bottom, where it's sort of away from the tube heat, and it's not getting hot, so it should be okay. And then I clean the controls.
Here's the pitch, up and away.
I did not clean the band switch because that's down in there sandwiched in some coils, and I didn't really want to get cleaner, take a chance of getting cleaner on anything that might detune any circuits, and the band switch seems to be fine, so we're not going to worry about that at this time.
Nice place.
2-2.
And when I get ready to clean that, I'll use some non-residue type cleaner to take care of that situation. Alright, I'm going to let this play a few more minutes, and then if nothing messes up, then we're going to button it back up. Now, as far as this blue cap, when I get back on this, I will move that back to the right position, and I'll probably find an old dud .01 microfarad paper cap and gut it. And this headphone coupling cap, I might do the same thing with that.
Other end, that will be just as big as Auburn High School. Probably will.
Alright, here we are back together. I've got the RF gain max, and when I turn the AVC off,
outside. 1 ball and 1 strike facing Dane Burns for the first time. With Auburn leading by 6.
Before it was distorting when I turned the AVC off.
Here's the 1-1.
Because of I attributed that because the okay, there it goes. Maybe the switch wasn't making good contact.
The first base line.
Now when I turn the RF gain down, it clears up. But with no AVC, it's being hit with such a hot signal that it's just distorting.
At 2-2.
Let's see what the BFO does.
Here comes the break even.
It works.
Bouncing ball to short. Charging. It's Reeves. Steps on the grass.
I'm just seeing if we can get anything else on here. I'm not really anticipating it. Let's see if we can find Brother Stayer anywhere on here. I think that noise is coming from the... maybe not coming from the phone. There's not going to be much, if anything, on shortwave this time of day, especially with no more of an antenna than we have on it. There's something trying to come in, but it's not really happening. There's some single sideband.
Oscar Hotel, round at both ends and high in the middle. Thank you and good luck. Whiskey 3, Uniform Sierra. For Victor Alpha 3, Bravo Alpha Sierra. Good evening. You're Sumter County, Florida.
There we go.
Good luck to you as well. Whiskey 3 Uniform Sierra, Florida QSO party.
Okay, that's enough. Turn the BFO. That's something. Okay, let's just look for standard AM. Good format for WMOX. It would be more entertaining than what's on there now. Sorry, I have to get my digs in every now and then.
It's not. And
there he goes.
In this mighty last 3 or 4 years, or let's go a little bit back, maybe, and the rest of them have rejected
back to back.
Yet they repented not. And they haven't. In this mighty last 3 or 4, His grace and mercy and long-suffering upon mankind. And man just kept building his Tower of Babel and just ignoring God. Today, we can't even, we don't know.
For inspiration. This is Worldwide Christian Radio, WWCR, Nashville, Tennessee, USA. USA.
The interviews, the breaking news, the top stories. When it goes down, we'll cover it here. Your Fox Sports Sunday is right now.
Any diminution of pressure on China at all at this point?
Israeli jets striking Beirut's southern suburbs in the third set.
Into shallow left center field. He has a short lead away from Cooper McMurray over on mistakes. Some small sound great.
Now, I'll tell you something that I've observed about older Hallicrafters radios. The majority of the ones that I've found over the years, even the ones that were beat up and looked like total crap, either worked as found or it didn't take much to get them working. Now, we won't count the very first generation S-38 that I was given whenever I was about 12. That was probably among one of the first 5 radios that I ever acquired, and it was built into a little consolette cabinet that somebody made for it and had it connected to a 10 or a 12-inch speaker in the bottom of the cabinet. I never could get that radio to working, but I don't really think there was much wrong with it. I think I was the biggest problem with it because I kept trying to replace a bumblebee capacitor with a resistor because I thought it was a resistor because it had a color code on it. That was before I had the episode with the other bumblebee capacitor, and the guy at the parts house gave me a lesson on the difference between a bumblebee capacitor and a resistor. But anyway, we won't count that radio. And now I wished I still had that set. Now, I've got a first generation S-38, but that little console cabinet is long gone. I don't even know what happened to it. I feel like after I removed the radio from the cabinet, my dad probably just eventually threw the cabinet away. Now, I was thinking about the lady that bought the Zenith Transoceanic and the other little Zenith at the estate sale, and I'll have to admit that I was a bit excited to see a younger person messing with an old radio, because most young people, I'm not saying all, but most have zero interest in this kind of thing, and especially females. Most females couldn't give a rat's behind about old stuff like this, and they see people like us who collect it is just hoarders and junk collectors who have some kind of mental illness. In fact, I remember a guy in one of the Facebook groups talking about how he'd met a young lady, and first time she came to his house, she pretty much let him know that either all the radios had to go or she was gone. Now, had that happened to me, and I just barely knew you, I would be telling her right away quick, no, I will not be getting rid of my radios. They've been here a lot longer than you have, and if you can't accept that fact, then you can go. And in my opinion, a domineering partner in a relationship has no place. I don't care if it's the male or the female, but that kind of crap shouldn't fly. And I've known plenty of guys who lived in domineering situations, and I've gotten a few radios from guys because their wife told them that it had to go, and they didn't have balls enough to stand up to her, but of course it was okay for her to do whatever it was she wanted to do. So I'm not going to get off on too big of a soapbox regarding relationships, but after dark we'll plug this radio back in and connect the antenna to the storm window and do a brief band scan. I won't do a very in-depth one. We'll save that until once the radio is properly serviced and aligned. But I will say one thing about the relationship aspect. I think where a lot of people make their mistake, both male and female, is they look at people for the wrong reasons. You know, you're either hung up on the nice car that they have, the size of their bank account, the nice house, the good time y'all are going to have together, and I don't think I have to draw you a picture regarding that. I think you can figure it out. And then you get involved with them, and then when they start acting like a horse's patoot, then you wonder why you never saw the signs before. Well, the signs were probably there all along, but you know, you were just paying too much attention to all those other things that really didn't matter to notice. I know years ago there was a girl at the church I attended who hooked up with this, what I call Mr. Cool Dude type, and he had the nice car and the nice house and the nice income, and I'm sure he was real fun to play around with, and then they got married and had some children, and then she finds out he's cheating on her and that he'd been doing it since day one, and you know, he treated her like crap and all that, and she just wondered how she never saw the signs. And like I said, they were probably there, but she just didn't notice them because she was paying attention to the other things. And then later, of course, he was one of those deadbeat types that didn't pay his child support and that sort of thing, and then somebody, and her dad told me one time about him using the ex-husband using the nice sports car to pick up all the chicks, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from saying, yeah, the exact same way he picked up your daughter, because she wouldn't have given him the time of day had he been an ordinary, down-to-earth guy who might have actually treated her like somebody, but you know, he didn't have all the big bucks and the nice house and all of that, you know, and there's nothing wrong with having all of that. But when you mistreat people and use those sort of things to manipulate people, then that's where the problem comes in. But at the same time, there's a lot of people out there that, well, to borrow an old expression, hadn't got a pot to pee in or a window to throw it out of, but they would treat you very respectfully. But anyway, enough about that. We'll wait a little after dark, and we'll fire this thing up and see what it does. On second thought, I think we'll fire it up now.
Right. On Friday when they have the Oaks, they're probably going to have less than a fast track. But
sounds like we got some possible Seems like I hear thunder in the background too, so that's not going to help us much. There's some VX.
Northeastern County in East Central Mississippi, Western Lauderdale County in East Central Mississippi, until 7:45 p.m. Central Daylight Time.
Well, apparently we're under a thunderstorm.
49 p.m. Central Daylight Time.
Watch.
A severe thunderstorm was located near Little Rock or near Decatur.
If you didn't raise your hand up yet, how many of you make a dish and go?
Europe lay in ruins.
Not going to be much on this first shortwave band, I don't think. Got a nice flywheel tuning on this thing.
Thanksgiving for the person that hosts and cooks the food.
There would be another good format for WMOX.
Today. Let me just check. 8P4 Whiskey Delta, if you did hear the station in France, Fox 4 Lima, Quebec, November, go ahead and try to work them. There, just give us your name. And we know you're in Barbados there, and we'll get the rest of the group going. We have a group that meets. Your noise down there.
Under the Oil for Food program. While oil What few citizens know is that the rush to war was due to Saddam Hussein's committing the high crime of accepting euro dollars for oil under the oil
accolades. And one of them said, however, he approved of some.
That's from Capitol Hill in Seattle, getting hooked on traditional blues stuff, and then starting underground and way issued April 21st. Geomagnetic field, electric oxidation. Da nossa hora diária de programação.
As OPEC's largest
care ne-a lăsat tecnicul și tradițiile, dar și casă de la Ghelari.
Now I'm on the final band. That's about all we getting on it so far is this noise. Well, we had some CBers going on there, but
you sure have, Captain Miller. That could be the reason for the mosquito man take care of that Captain Miller 491 down there along his fucking mind, man. He says it's because he been hanging around me. I don't know about that. But I know one damn thing. I ain't taking no hostages today. I see you. We're here a little low modulator. Walk on. Good evening to you. Hope you had a nice weekend. I'm gone. Next time you want to come in there, Captain, you got to do it a little bit better than what you did, man. You know what I'm saying? That was just being plain.
yeah, so we know all 4 bands are operative, so that's a good sign. There's just too much thunderstorm activity for us to get much on the AM band. Standard broadcast band.
Every hour, a lot of information and it's changing fast. At the top and the bottom of the hour. Past the budget, everyone cannot have nuclear weapons. Happens here today on full display. Get the and you'll understand when you take it all in. News Radio 105 WERC. The 40s and 40s.
I'm with you. I thought they had a really solid draft.
We'll see how it plays out for Seattle. I thought that was interesting because San Francisco in Roses next Saturday.
Okay, that's enough for now. We'll do a much more extensive band scan once this thing is fully operational, and I think this thing, even though it was considered a mid-level receiver, I think this thing will be as hot as a pistol whenever we get it fully up to snuff. So that's all we've got for now. I hope you got something out of all of this, and more to come later.
Okay. That's just my thought. I also have a vertical over here that I'm not supposed to send to, but yeah, whatever. Other than that, it's a pretty simple system.
based on the desire for their own religion to be the one on top, ruling and converting all others, wouldn't you say? Political ambitions like these.
I will say one thought in closing about shortwave. I first discovered the medium back around late 89, early 90.
Listeners, stay tuned.
You are listening to World's Last Chance Radio.
Whenever I bought a Royal 3000 Zenith Transoceanic,
To be a blessing. His stated purpose for marriage is that the couple become one flesh.
and back then there was station after station after station all across the bands, but like the BBC, Radio Moscow, Radio Havana, Cuba, I think that's still around. Radio Japan, there was some stuff out of China. HCJB out of Ecuador, Voice of America. But all of that's mostly gone now because the internet has taken the place of shortwave broadcasting and is also cheaper to operate than running a bunch of high-powered transmitters. But one thing we need to remember that not everybody in the world, as hard as it is to believe, has access to an internet connection, so it still has its place. Shortwave still has its place. Now, and today, what about all you're going to hear is Brother Stare on 15 places on the dial and other religious programming, but occasionally you'll run up on a station playing oldies or some content that you might want to hear, but it's not near what it was 35 plus years ago. Oh, wait, I forgot to show one crucial piece of information. That's the schematic for this is found in Riders. Okay, we have a 6K7 for a RF amplifier, and this does have a tuned RF stage, 3-gain tuning capacitor, 6L7 mixer, and then we go down here and we have a 6J5 for a local oscillator, 6K7 IF amplifier, 6Q7 first audio and detector, an AVC, and 6F6 audio output, another 6J5 for the beat frequency oscillator, and then a Type 80 rectifier. And then here is the capacitor in the headphone circuit. It couples the plate of the output tube to the headphones. The purpose of that capacitor is to keep DC off of the headphones, but it still uses the primary of the audio output transformer as a plate load. And then whenever we insert the headphone jack, a headphone plug into the jack, it disconnects the speaker and places the headphones in the off of the plate of the audio output tube. So nothing really exotic about the circuit. It really is relatively simple in the grand scheme of things. This switch here in the center tap of the high voltage winding is the receive and standby switch. When placed in standby, the tube heaters stay hot, but the B plus is turned off, and that's beneficial if you're transmitting. And then this here looks like the AVC defeat switch. And then this switch here in the plate circuit of the 6J5 BFO tube, that turns that feature off and on. Our tone control circuit is in the control grid of the audio output tube, so no high voltage there as far as that capacitor shorting. Now here is the capacitor that was replaced that, according to this, is between plate and ground. They've got it between plate and screen grid. They might have chosen to do it that way because if it shorts, it won't be shunting the B plus right straight to ground. Okay, I guess that's about it for now, but you'll probably see this again one day.